Madison Torio, the artist behind Wandering. I came out with my new collection a couple weeks ago, and I'm diving in a little bit deeper into each of the paintings, starting with Counteroffer. I took the reference photo for Counteroffer because I was solo traveling and I had kind of made it to the last leg of my trip. I had been traveling around Europe for about a month, and my last week was to spend some time by myself in Amsterdam. After a few weeks of traveling, I'd stayed in a couple different places, and the location I stayed in the longest was definitely this little apartment in Paris where I had an Airbnb that wasn't the most luxurious. It was very small. It had a pretty unsettling smell about it, and I had a couple complications with the check-in process and dealing with the Airbnb host. It did have an incredible view, so for that it was worth staying in a kind of small, dingy, smelly apartment. But after that experience and being in some other kind of like smaller budget accommodations, I decided to treat myself a little bit for the last leg of my trip in Amsterdam, and I booked a still reasonable but like slightly more expensive than what I had spent on the rest of the trip. I think it was listed as like a B&B, but it was kind of like a weird hotel situation where I was able to just like check into my room itself, and there wasn't really like a lobby. If anything, it looked like a condo or like an apartment building from the outside, but it had this gorgeous bathroom and this amazing window seat that I definitely took advantage of. I loved reading there, loved sitting there. It was amazing for people watching. The tile in the bathroom itself has obviously stuck with me. It's been in two different paintings of mine now. I feel like when I'm looking for something to paint, one of the things that can really draw my eye is color. I love color. I love playing with color. I love complementary colors, and I love just like kind of mixing those colors that look really great together. And I think that is what mainly drew me to this bathroom tile. It was such this like beautiful shade of kind of like a burnt orange. Another thing I love a lot in my reference paintings can be light or reflection, or kind of like just different transparencies that can be really fun to paint. I really love when light is shining through something and casting somewhat of like a shadow or a glimmer on a countertop or on the floor or something like that. And so having the crystal glass in the bathroom that I had actually just been using to drink water because there wasn't any other cups available in the hotel room, but I really loved the way the light was kind of like dancing off the cup, and I in my head thought that it would be a really fun thing to paint. I hadn't painted in a pretty long time, but after traveling around Europe for about a month, I'd been to so many museums and I had just kind of like rekindled this love of art within myself, and I knew that once I got back home I wanted to put those thoughts to practice. And I remember taking photos of this kind of like counter setup that I had. I tried not to manufacture it too much. It just kind of like everything was where it was. This painting took me about 2 months to paint, which I feel like with oils has seemed to be around my average. I'm definitely a lot slower with oils generally, aside from the ones that I like intentionally want to paint all in one sitting. But yes, this piece took me a couple months of kind of going back and forth. I think because it's so detailed, it felt a little bit daunting as I was working on it, so it did take a little bit longer. I think it turned out pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, so worth the time. I came up with the name Counteroffer because I love a play on words. I love reading, I love writing, and I love when words have double meanings. I think it can be really fun to play around with, and I remember just like staring at this painting and thinking like what I could call it, and I kind of just started like thinking of different words that I was associating with this painting, like sink or counter, and that was kind of when Counteroffer came to me. I think this piece really taught me to just do one thing at a time, and when something looks really overwhelming, to just break it down into smaller pieces. I think it was really fun to go in and paint each like individual little product in this painting. I think looking at the reference photo itself, it felt very overwhelming because there was a lot of items, there was a lot of different colors going on, and when I kind of just like focused in on individual little parts of the painting and just where the shadows fell and where the lights and highlights and what color went where, it made things feel a lot more reasonable, and I had a better time understanding what it was that I needed to do. And I think that can be applied to a lot of things in life. Just it might feel like this big, overwhelming, daunting task, but when you really break it down into little parts, it can just feel a lot easier to manage. Counter offer is reminiscent of bathroom contemplations. That moment where you've planned to go out and be social, but when the time comes, a night of self-care and being in bed early suddenly sounds like paradise. Maybe it's the morning after, tidying up from last night as the sun peeks through the curtains in the other room, signaling that it's time to get ready for a new day, despite the warmth of your blanket calling you back to bed. Perhaps it's an offering of products scattered on the counter like a shrine as you manifest a life amongst the stars. Featuring the same tile from my debut collection's shower niche, this painting offers a new perspective of the same bathroom, playing with reflections and transparency in my first still life oil painting. I took the reference photo for looking up when I was kind of taking a little break from working. I love to just like sit outside and contemplate for a little bit, maybe do some gardening to help my mindset. And I was sitting gardening and I kind of just like was feeling overwhelmed with all the tasks that I needed to do and the painting that I was currently working on. And I looked up to the sky and just like needed a moment. And as I was looking up, I realized that I liked the layout of things that I saw before me. I liked where the roof hit. I liked how the green was kind of like coming over a fence towards me. And I especially loved how the light was shining through the leaves in the greenery. I pointed my phone up and I took a picture, and I actually went inside and decided to just paint that right then and there to kind of work as like a reset for my brain. I'd been working on a very detailed, very important portrait that was going to be a gift for a couple people I love very dearly, and I wanted it to be perfect, but I feel like that perfection was killing me a little bit. It was making it feel really hard to move forward because I just like didn't feel great about how things were looking, and I was just feeling super overwhelmed by the painting I was working on. And I had another project I needed to start that was also going to be a portrait. This one was going to be a portrait of an animal, so slightly different and easier, still a lot more detailed, and things had to be very precise. I was just feeling stressed about the thought of taking on that task. So I knew I needed some kind of painting in between the portraits to just give myself a little bit of a reset and to just be able to paint big and not quite so minute and detailed. Something that really drew me to this reference photo was that it was kind of like 3 main colors that I needed to mix, which already felt really nice for my brain, like a break. And a lot of the sections were very big, so I was able to just kind of like mindlessly paint and then kind of clean it up as I go. I also really loved how the light and the shadows looked, and I thought that that could be fun for me to play around with a little bit. This painting took me about 2.5 hours to complete, which I think is probably the fastest out of any painting in this collection. Like I said, a lot about this painting was a lot easier to paint than anything else in this collection as well, just because of the simplicity and the bigger spaces to just like mindlessly fill color. But I think it is fun to have a little bit of a range to my paintings, and it's fun to have certain things that take a little bit longer and then certain things that you kind of get that like immediate gratification of finishing. I think as an artist, it can be really hard to finish projects that take longer than one sitting, and it really takes a lot of self-discipline to like come back to something that's been giving you a hard time or that you've been having trouble completing for whatever reason. I do love to every once in a while set out with the task of completing something all at once to just like get that little dopamine hit of like finishing something and feeling proud of it. I think something I love about this painting is the light and the shadow that I have going on with the leaves. I think the leaves kind of going the most towards the center have a little bit more light coming in through them, turning them kind of like a more yellowish green. And then on the opposite side of the painting, you have the shadows that those leaves are casting. I feel like this painting makes me feel really calm, and I wonder if that in part is because it was such like a fun, easy painting to create. But I hope that it does invoke that feeling in others of just like a brain break and like needing that second to just like look to the sky and remember that like, yes, your feelings are important and valid and your problems are valid, but sometimes just like looking up and looking to the sky, you realize that you are quite small and that things will be okay and everything will work out. Sometimes you just need to look up and take a breath, and that's what looking up feels like to me. I came up with the name Looking Up pretty quickly. I honestly don't really name my paintings while I'm painting them, but once I choose the collection or once once I post it on social media and I feel like I have to give it a name, that's kind of when I do go through the effort of brainstorming and narrowing it down. With Looking Up, I don't think there was much brainstorming. I kind of looked at that one and said looking up. I think it just makes a lot of sense, but it still plays into that kind of like double entendre a little bit of different meanings of looking up, whether it's literal or metaphorical. I feel like painting this piece reminded me that I can take things less seriously and just go for it and still have a great outcome. I think sometimes I put a lot of pressure on myself when I want something to look a certain way, and I think paintings like this that I complete in a short period of time or in one sitting can really just remind me that like sometimes less is more, and that there is still beauty and simplicity. Not everything has to be super detailed. I think it's really fun to look at two of my paintings like Looking Up and Counteroffer and just know the differing amounts of time and effort that each painting took, and feeling like I love both equally for different reasons. It's just always a good reminder that sometimes it's not about the time or effort spent, it's about the love poured into it. And it's a great reminder to myself that not every piece has to be this like super detailed, great masterpiece. It can also be fun to create and have quickness and movement and confidence that you just like embed in something that you do because you want to. The inspiration behind Looking Up is both literal and metaphorical. I had to look up from where I was sitting to notice the composition I referenced for this painting. The worm's eye view features the tops of a gate, a roof, and some greenery. I painted it around the time I launched my debut collection after feeling lost and uncertain in my career for years. Finding purpose through my art made me feel like things were really looking up.